The subject that I'm going to cover today, I've given the grand title, The Anatomy of Generosity, because this is where we really get inside the question of what is generosity. And I'm talking particularly and specifically about financial generosity. Lots of people are generous with their time, with their talents, but this is all about treasure. And I'm going to use a number of charts and diagrams to try and get you thinking, to help you to locate your own situation and to help you make some informed decisions about your own future generosity. We're going to touch on questions such as how intentional are we about our finances, and how aware are we about our finances when it comes to generosity and that whole subject of being outwardly orientated and being aware of the needs of others rather than just ourselves. The first thing that I want to show you is to build up a bit of a picture of what is the typical sort of household outgoings. So some of the costs that we might all have to deal with, and we could show that on a chart like this one. We could talk about the costs simply of rent or mortgage, and there's putting groceries on the table, there's costs associated with utilities, heating our home, the electricity bill, the water utilities, the phone bill, all those kind of things that hit us on a regular basis. There's transport costs, whether we have a car or whether we don't. We've got to get around, we've got to get to and from work, visiting people, etc. There's the clothes that we stand up in and walk around in, and how much of our monthly income we put in that direction. Then there's entertainment and leisure, how much we choose to spend on those items, and finally whether we're putting anything away for the future into a pension scheme, into a future pot that we can spend on sending our kids to university, or that sort of thing. So this is just a very generic kind of chart, and it has here, you'll see, a kind of a baseline. There is a basic level at which all of us need a certain amount of income just to survive. I call it the getting by line. So every single one of those items, the cost of the rent, the cost of the bills, the cost of getting around, putting clothes on our back and food on our table. We know that there are some people, maybe it's us, maybe we've lived at this point at some point in our own life, we're living below the just getting by line. And that's a very difficult place to be. And then hopefully, we do attain at some point in our lives, and hopefully we get to spend much of our lives above the getting by line, so that we've got some surplus that we can spend on enjoying life, on actually thriving. So if our typical grocery basket might cost us £100 a week, then if we're interested in quality, if we have some special things that we enjoy, we might bump that up with some discretionary income. There might be a certain baseline at which we can put clothes on our back and shoes on our feet and on our children's feet. But beyond that, we want to buy them nicer shoes for their feet or for ourselves. The transport for getting around. We might get around in a clap-tight old banger. We might use some of our discretionary income to drive a modestly nicer car. And so there's a discretionary income that we have hopefully within our disposal to spend as well. And then beyond that, we're into the luxury category. So does any of our income, do we even have enough income to stretch into luxury items? Could we afford a 5-star holiday if we really wanted one? Or do we like to enjoy wearing designer clothes? Do we want to actually move out of a neighborhood where the housing is cheaper and into a more aspirational neighborhood and take on a bigger mortgage, and perhaps enjoy the lifestyle that a larger house brings? And so in each of these different bars on the graph, there's the possibility, depending on how wealthy we are, to go beyond basic survival through discretionary spending and into a life of luxury. And at every stage on that journey, there's the opportunity to be generous. I've travelled around the world to some very, very poor places, and it's in fact in some of the poorest parts of the world that I've experienced the greatest generosity. So generosity doesn't just begin when we reach the getting by line, although we must recognise that those who are being generous and living below the getting by line are actually being generous at their own cost, being generous in terms of taking food from their own table to put it on the table of somebody else, for example. So very, very challenging issues when you're hovering around that getting by line. But beyond it, when we're into discretionary spending and when we're into luxury goods, then there is clearly much greater potential for sharing and for giving to others. And so I'd like you really just to think about those issues for a few more minutes, and I'm going to drill down into these graphs a little bit more. I want to show you household A. Here's household A. You can see this is a household that is living below the getting by line. And so any finances that are being shared beyond a household to others that are also in need, that's essentially an incredible act of generosity that's being shown there, because this is a household that's not even getting by and yet is sharing with others to its own cost. Now, household B, we can see here, household B certainly is getting by. There's a couple of items on here, the utility bills, not paying more than is necessary, putting a little bit aside for the future, and then quite a bit of discretionary spending. And let's imagine that this is a household that really enjoys entertainment and living that kind of lifestyle and has a great family holiday every year in a fantastic resort. Nothing to feel guilty about. That's some decisions that this household has made, and out of that discretionary spending and luxury, there's also the possibility of increasing their generosity because there's a lot of surplus in this household to go around. And then we'll push into household C, and we can see in household C, this is a household that's doing extremely well in every indicator. They're more than getting by, and they're well up into lots of surplus cash for discretionary spending and all manner of luxury items, living in a great neighbourhood, fantastic food on the table, several really wonderful cars to get around in, designer clothes, a fantastic social life, lots and lots of travel, and indeed also plenty to be generous with. The question I want to ask at this point is, what if household B compared themselves to household C? How would they be feeling about that? One of the things that might be a consequence of household B comparing themselves to household C is they might be deceived into thinking that they're not getting by and that they don't have enough, and that somehow their objective needs to be pushing the bars on their own graph a bit higher. Whereas if they compare themselves to household A, they'll see that actually they're incredibly well off and that they've got all that they need to live very comfortably and probably have a good deal to spare and to be generous with besides. That's probably given you the basic model that we're working with here. And hopefully you can immediately begin to see how your own household budget might transpose onto that model. I want to leave you with about half a dozen questions just to consider. And you can reflect on these. You might want to discuss them around the family dinner table. You might want to discuss them with friends. First one, I suppose, very simply is, are you living above that getting by line? Millions aren't, and if you're in a difficult time of your life and you're not getting by, then I really, really hope that the help you need is not very far away. Second question, if we've established that you are getting by and that you've got discretionary expenditure that you can use, then how familiar are you with the levels of your discretionary expenditure and what you're doing with it? Is that something that you're cognizant of, or something that just kind of, life happens and money goes in, money comes out, and you don't really know what's going on with it? So getting clear about that would be question 2. Question 3, are there any luxuries that you enjoy to indulge in? And what are they? And are they choices that you actively make? And why do you make those choices? How do those luxuries, those little luxuries of life, give you meaning? Just to be clear about that. And also to know that there are not perhaps certain aspects of your life where it's just kind of running away and you're not making intentional choices about perhaps how you'd want to live your life. Question 4, is there any discretionary expenditure or any luxuries that you're deliberately going without in order to be more generous? Is that something you've specifically made a decision on? I could spend my money in this way, but actually I'm choosing not to. Question 5, are you happy with the balance of your graph? If you think about all the things that your money is getting spent on, is everything in proper order? Is that how you would choose it to be, or is that just how things have ended up? And then finally, perhaps the most important question, are there any bars on your graph that you'd like to rebalance? Is there any area in which spending is perhaps a little bit out of control and you'd like to bring it back into order, particularly so that you've got more available to be generous to others. I hope that's what you would choose to do. Thanks for watching.